Hello everyone, and welcome to this series on creating 2D art for your games in Unity. My name is Steve Curtis. I will be your instructor today, and specifically with this course, what we wanted to create was a way of doing art for our mobile type games in 2D that really doesn't require that you be an artist in any way, shape, or form. What we really wanted to do is be able to harness the power of Photoshop to create art for your games, even if you don't feel you have a single artistic bone in your body. Maybe you're someone who's been here and has only learned programming, and that's where your interest lies. You have this great idea for a game, but you don't have any artist friends handy to help out. We're going to show you how to create this art procedurally with Photoshop, really requiring no talent at all. So in place of talent, we're going to build skills and knowledge and create the artwork for our game. So let's start out. I'm going to create a new one, and you can see I already have set here a 1024 by 1024 trans. So I'm going to work in a power of 2 texture, 1024, and I'm going to make sure my background is transparent. That'll give us something that looks like this. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start looking at our game from back to front. So we're going to start with our furthest back art first, and we're going to work our way forward. So the first thing we need is a sky. Our first level in this Unity series will be an outdoor mountain and forest type scene. So we're going to start with creating a sky, and the first thing we're going to do is find a kind of sky blue. And as this will be cartoony, all of our colors are actually going to be fairly saturated, so most of the time I'm going to be working in this right third of our color picker, and most of that time will actually be spent in this upper right quadrant with very saturated colors. So now I'm going to click on my back color, and this time I'm going to color sample from the front color. Then I'm just going to bring this down so that I get two nice changes in blue. Now I'm going to come over to my gradient tool, and I'm going to make sure that I'm set on my first gradient selection. And so you can see we're going to pull from light to dark, and that's fine. That's exactly what we want to do. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to hold shift so I get a perfectly straight pull. Pull that down to the bottom, and we get a nice little gradient. Now in reality, your gradient would actually be reversed. The sky that appears closer to you or up towards the top would actually be darker, and further away would be lighter. But since we're doing a very cartoony game and we want it to be bright, a lot of this dark is going to be unseeable most of the time because it'll have stuff in front of it. So we're going to do it this way, even though that's not really the reality of how atmospheric depth works. Alright, so we've got our sky. Now, we could just save this out and scroll our little sky. But, I mean, to a degree, it seems like a waste to throw away one entire texture just for a sky gradient. So we're going to put our rear set of mountains right on top of our sky. And then we'll create other stuff to go in front of that on different texture sheets. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to label my old one sky, and we're going to call this one mountain BG for background. So now, and again, I'm only using my mouse to do this because if you're a programmer or something like that, you may not have a tablet to work with, and working with a mouse to create art can be very, very difficult. So by me using a mouse, it's going to force me to show you ways that we can harness Photoshop to make up for some of our shortcomings. So I'm going to create just a single mountain here, and I'm going to start in this lower left corner, and I'm going to end in this lower right corner, just so that when this tile side to side, the mountains all kind of touch down in these corners. It's unlikely we're ever going to be able to actually see that because of the other things that'll be in front of it. But just to keep doing things the way we should do them, we're going to do that anyway. So I'm just going to come right up from that corner. And that went horribly wrong. This is where a mouse can really be a pain. That's okay, because I'm going to show you how to fix it. And I'm just going to bring this down right into that corner. Alright, so we've got a selection, but our selection looks a little bit funky. So what we need to do is come in and get rid of this chunk here. So we're going to hold down Shift, which will allow us to add to our selection, which is not what I want. Ignore what I just said there. We're going to hold down Alt, which will allow us to subtract. So we're going to just come in here, grab this part we don't like, make a little circle there, and we got rid of that. That's not too bad. I kind of don't like this here either, but in this case I'm going to add to it and bring that out a little bit. So I'm going to hold down Shift here. I'm just going to come right off there, come down, and come around and grab that. And now we've got our mountain. So that's not too bad. But now we need to give it some mountain color. We've already got this sky color in the background. And you could do any series of colors you want depending on what your color palette is for your game. I'm using just a lot of very bright cartoony colors, and I'm not really too worried about sticking to like a tertiary color palette or anything like that. But I do need it to come out a little bit different. So I'm going to darken this up. And that's okay there. And I'm going to do the same thing by grabbing my background and then sampling my foreground. And then we'll grab that. That's just fine. And now we need to paint in mountains in a kind of cartoony fashion. But perhaps we're no good at painting. So we're going to play around a little bit. We're going to come down to Filter. I'm going to go to Render and render some clouds. You see we get this nice blend of our foreground and background colors, but it's not really cartoony. So we're going to do another filter on it, and this time we're going to go to our filter gallery. And as you can see, I was already there. Under our texture heading, I'm going to choose stained glass. And I'm going to set my cell sizes at about 32, border thickness of about 7, and most importantly, I want absolutely no light intensity. You see how it gets that kind of reflective look? Well, we're going to fiddle around with that when we're all done. So we want 0 on our light intensity. And we've got this nifty little mountain set here. So I can hit Control D and deselect that, and that's fine. But now we need to do some things to make it look a little bit more like a mountain. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to create some snowy tops for it. So I'm going to go over to my brush. I'm going to pick a hard round brush, and I'm going to use only default brushes. And I'm going to enlarge that. You can enlarge that by hitting your bracket keys in Photoshop, or by just changing it over here. So that I've got somewhere around 1/3 or a little bit less of this width of this mountaintop. I'm going to choose an absolute white. And now, very importantly, over here on this layer, I'm going to click the lock pixel. And what that will do is prevent us from creating any color outside of where we've already put color. So if I click out here, I don't get anything. That's exactly what I want, because I'm going to start above that, kind of in the center. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to click, and I'm going to pull down. There we go. That might be more than I like. Now, you may have seen that when I did this, I got kind of a uneven edge on that. That's probably our brush setting. See, we have our spacing at 25%, so we're going to bring that back down. And you can just take it to 0 depending on how good your computer is. But the more we stack these single circles, because this is really just a series of single circles, the more we stack those on top of each other, the harder the draw is going to be on your computer. So I'm pulling it down to 10-12%, something like that, just enough to get that even line and save a little bit of work on my processor. Alright, so I'm actually going to make that brush just a hair smaller. And I'm going to bring this down. That's not bad. And then I'm just going to keep pulling down and make some rounded, make some rounded snow shapes. So again, I'm going to click, then hit Shift, pull that down, click, then hit Shift, click, and then hit Shift, and I'm going to stagger these from the other side so it doesn't look too even. Click, and then hit Shift, and we've got a bit of a mountaintop. Now, we're only going to have one problem with this. I'm going to show you what that is. We're working in an absolute white. Here's the problem with that. When we go to do our lighting for this, to give it a particular sense of depth, the way we're going to do it, our white's really not going to do anything. So we're going to undo that. And instead, I'm going to take this white and I'm going to give it just a little bit of blue in it. Against all these really saturated colors, it'll be hard to really notice that there's any blue in it, but it's going to matter later. So we're going to do this again. Click and Shift. Click and Shift. And the reason we click and then Shift first outside is because if we hit Shift first, wherever we click, you can see it jumped from the last place we were. So we don't want that. So we're going to click and Shift, click and Shift, click and Shift. That's pretty good. And then we're going to do this mountain over here, but it's a little bit smaller, so I'm going to take my brush size down a little. And that's also going to help us give some depth to this. And the reason for that is, if you use repetitive shapes that go from larger to smaller, even with nothing else there to say this thing is further away, the brain tends to think of it as further away. So we're going to take advantage of that. Because this background, really, while they're playing, it's meant to just kind of be pretty back there. But you don't want it so unbelievably gorgeous that they actually stop paying attention to their game and look at this magnificent background. It's a background. We want it to be nice, but we want them to kind of not notice that it's nice and just live with it the way it is. Alright, so now we've got our mountain. We're going to do one more thing, and that's to go along with this kind of cell-shaded look, which is why I use the stained glass for the mountains. We also want to border it. So up here in our Edit menu, we can click on that and come down to Stroke. 6 pixels should be fine, because we don't want a super thick line. But we do want to change the color, and for once we do want an absolute black or white, in this case black. Click OK, and we've got a nice little border on that. So that's fine. Oh, you know what I did? I know why that border looks a little thin. Let's unlock our pixels here and try that again. Now, this is what happens. So if you run into some of your borders for similar things seem thinner than others, check to see if you had pixels locked. And this is why, because you can see our stroke is running from the center. of the line that it will be stroking. But if our pixels were locked, that means that half of it went in and half of it went out, and the half that went out never showed up because we'd locked out the pixels. So let's try that again. And there we go. We get a much nicer, much better line. Alright, our mountains are based on. At this point, we're going to do something to add some lighting rather than have an actual light like in a 3D game. We have to fake our lighting because all of this stuff is 2D. It's not really going to shadow and light like we want it to if we just use a light inside Unity. That won't work. So we have to fake our lighting. Now, we have to decide where's our lighting going to be coming from. So for this whole level, I've decided that this upper left-hand corner is where our light is going to be coming from. So we're going to tend to have brighter sunlight on this side and shadow on this side. So we have to create that. However, that being said, if we're going to create alternate mountains, now is the time to do it.